Vistaduharaname Sarvani O Madhishnataya, cause of being my sitting place. Bhavadvi Vayu Charani, that move. Bhutani, living entities. Sutta, my dear sons. Dhruvani, that do not move. Sambhavitavyani, to be respected. Pade Pade, at every moment. Va, Vayu, Vivikta Drigbi, possessing clear vision and understanding that the Supreme Personality of Godhead in His Paramatma feature is situated everywhere. Tatu, that indirectly. Ha, certainly. Arhanam, offering respect. May, unto me. Translation. My dear sons, you should not envy any living entity, be he moving or non-moving, knowing that I am situated in them. You offer respect to all of them at every moment. In this way, you offer respect to me. Purport. In this verse, the word Vivikta Drigbi, meaning without envy, is used. All living entities are the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in His Paramatma feature, as confirmed in Brahma Samhita. Andantarastam Paramanu Chayantarastam. The Lord is situated in this universe as Garbhodakashaya Vishnu and Kshirodakashaya Vishnu. He is also situated within every atom. According to the Vedic statement, Ishavasyam Midam Sarvam, the Supreme Lord is situated everywhere, and wherever He is situated is His temple. We even offer respects to a temple from a distant place, and all living entities should similarly be offered respect. This is different from the theory of pantheism, which hold that everything is God. Everything has a relationship with God because God is situated everywhere. We should not make any particular distinction between the poor and the rich, like the foolish worshippers of Daridra Narayan. Narayan is present in the rich as well as the poor. We did not simply think Narayan is situated among the poor. He is everywhere. An advanced devotee will offer respects to everyone, even to cats and dogs. Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmane Gavihastini Sunichaiva Shvapakecha Pandita Samadarshina. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater. This Samadarshina, equal vision, should not be mistaken to mean that the individual is the same as the Supreme Lord. They are always distinct. Every individual person is different from the Supreme Lord. It is a mistake to equate the individual living entity with the Supreme Lord on the plea of Viviktadrik, Samadrik. The Lord is always in an exalted position, even though He agrees to live everywhere. Srila Madhvacharya, quoting the Padma Purana, states, Vikta drishti jivanam dishnataya parameshvarasya bhaida drishti. One who has clear vision and who is devoid of envy can see that the Supreme Lord is separate from all living entities, although He is situated in every living entity. Madhva Acharya further quotes from the Padma Purana, Papadayet paratmanam jivebhyo ya padei padei vedainaiva na chaitasmat priyo vishnostu kaschana. One who sees the living entity and the Supreme Lord as always distinct is very dear to the Lord. Padma Purana also states, Yo hares chaiva jivanam veda vakta hare priya. One who preaches that the living entities are separate from the Supreme Lord is very dear to Vishnu. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swavadantikam Mandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangsha Shri Shri Rupam Sagrastam. Sorry, didn't know this perfectly. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sarvani madvishnataya bhavadvis charani bhutani sutadruvani sambhavitavyani padai padaivo viviktadrikvis tadoharhaname. Dear sons, you should not envy any living entity, be he moving or non-moving. Knowing that I am situated in them, you should offer respects to all of them at every moment. In this way, you offer respect to me. So in this chapter, we are coming to the end now of Lord Rshabhadeva's teachings to his sons. And a very well-known chapter and a really powerful, quite a few sort of, so we can say, Bhakti Vaibhav verses coming out of that, instructions. It's because they are so um, very powerful, very direct, and very focused, you could say. And so keeping in mind that this is the instructions of Supreme Personality of Godhead, the incarnation of the Supreme Lord, who is then playing his part perfectly and instructing his sons before his departure. We see that soon after this instructions, he basically now will hand over his kingdom to his sons, and then soon after that, take to a very peculiar form they call the Jada Yoga, like it's the practicing severe renunciation and austerity. As Robert says later, we will see how manifesting that portion of the Lord's specific ability to become renounced. So Rishabhadev is really extreme in the extent to which he became completely disconnected and disinterested in the material affairs in the material world. And we will see, ironically enough, as we see in these last verses, such a very big emphasis in placed on being respectful. We see that the beginning of the verse, the beginning of the chapter, the strong emphasis that is being made is on the emphasis to avoid fruitive activity, which is really one of those things that one has to again and again be reminded of, specifically those who are not in the renounced ashrams, ironically enough. We hear that we have different ashrams in the Varnashram system, and some ashrams are perhaps more renounced than others. But the goal of all these ashrams is ultimately to cultivate the spirit of renunciation. Renunciation is not just a matter of ashram. It's not just that it's one person's responsibility, not the other one. It is the only way by which one will ultimately become released from bondage to the material world. So we see that it's very fascinating that Rshabhadev's emphasis here is then placed on becoming detached and on warning one's dependents, or those under one's shelter, to see that the duty, as he says, of a king, of a guru, of a husband, of a public administrator, whatever your specific position is, you have to understand that ultimately the ultimate welfare of living entities is that they have to somehow become freed from their bondage to fruitive action. So the first section of verses all explains the just that dynamic of understanding, well, where do we find ourselves in? We find ourselves within material energy, and the material energy is a very dangerous place because the material energy has the capacity to completely delude the living entity. And how is the living entity deluded? Well, he's deluded by becoming addicted to fruitive activity, which then colors the consciousness, completely colors the consciousness. And what happens if the consciousness becomes colored or perturbed by fruitive activity? Well, what happens then is that the living entity's intelligence gets totally bewildered, and he loses the capacity to differentiate between what is in his ultimate welfare and what is his short-term welfare. That's what fruitive activity means. The natural desire that every living entity has to be happy and to act for his own self-interest, which is very natural. Everyone has that. Everybody acts naturally for their own self-preservation. Everybody is trying to do things that will make them happy or that they think will bring them some benefit. But when the consciousness becomes covered by fruitive activity, then that natural tendency for acting in one's own self-interest becomes hijacked by short-term activity. And one can only one can only see the value of things if they're somehow going to bring one money. Uh, let's be honest. It's to a large part what it really means, especially the modern world in which you have to pay for every single thing. And you see that more and more as the modern world progresses, you're going to have to pay for everything. Um, that's the only way that's just how the society works now. So most people are totally absorbed in the pursuit to make money, and not even really out of greed. And interestingly enough, I mean, there's obviously a large section of the population that is, you know, super greedy, and greed is a big thing. Everybody wants more and more and more. But I mean, many people are just trying to pay rent. Yeah, just trying to pay rent and pay for food and trying to run away from trying to get out of the cycle of living in debt. Um, Larger and larger portion of society is also living like that. So the point being that the material energy does that to us. It makes us then believe that the only thing that is really valuable, the only thing I can really spend any time on is something that will bring me some kind of sense enjoyment. Some immediate benefit has to be there. Otherwise, we cannot have faith in it. We have no interest in it. We have no faith in it. Well, that is what Rshabhadeva is warning us against, saying, listen, you have to be careful that your consciousness is not covered by fruitive activity, because then you won't be able to invest in what is of ultimate importance, which is to go back home, back to Godhead. Um, so he goes through these instructions in the beginning of the section and makes it very clear that that is therefore why you can see that he is instructing his sons. He's giving his son now his final word. What is his final instruction to his sons before he now leaves them and now they have to take responsibility for their own life? That's what he tells them. He says, remember this principle. Remember what's the ultimate goal. Remember what is your actual duty to the citizens. And that's what he leaves them with. Very interesting. We see similarly, most of you might have seen that video that Karamakanana Swami made just before his departure, his last message. And that last message was also very similar, not necessarily similar. Well, it was very similar, actually. It's very stark, actually, very serious at that point of life, at the end of life, when it becomes very serious and when becomes very firm and is resolved. We saw that Maharaj was extremely firm in that last time of his life to continue just focusing on the ultimate goal. And that was his instructions that he left his disciples with. Is the he glorified the four regulative principles and this life of vows, living a life of vows and living a life of service, not missing the boat, not missing not missing what's ultimate benefit. And you know, that is very interesting. And it is a difficult task. And we see that Rshabhadeva explains that this is the spiritual preceptor should continue instructing his disciples to be detached, to be renounced, even if they don't listen. He should just continue speaking the truth, speaking the plain truth, which is that the problems that you're experiencing in the ultimate sense is due to your entanglement in the material energy. And that the only ultimate solution is that you have to become free from material desire. That really is, there's nothing we can say. We cannot try to change this world, make this world anything that it is not. This world is what it is. And but then we see so Lord Sabrev makes this point very clearly, establishes that ultimate basic goal of life. That's very crucial to orientate oneself properly to the world. And then he transitions. Then he starts to glorify the Brahmanas. It's very interesting. We've seen the last section, the last few verses, he then starts to glorify the Brahmanas. And yeah, very important. Because how are you going to do this? How are you going to, how are you going to protect yourself from the deluding potency of the material energy? How are you going to stop yourself from becoming overwhelmed by fruitive activity and, becoming just a dull materialist if you're not going to have the association of the Brahmanas? How are you going to do that? So Brahmanas are very rare. A Brahmana is a rare person. So people that are really fixed in the mode of goodness, which doesn't mean, people that are mode of goodness can sometimes be seen in different ways. But the mode of goodness, ultimately, the mode of goodness in its pure manifestation means people that are really fixed on investing in the eternal. You see, sattva, what does that word even mean? Sat means eternal, and va means ness, like quality, like you have darkness and you have boldness. So sattva means that quality of sattva, the quality of eternality. So see the perspective of looking from life from the eternal perspective, looking at yourself, seeing that ultimately I am eternal, and then making your decisions on that basis. That is what it means to be in the mode of goodness. That's what it means to be sattvic. That's when you can start cutting through uh, the illusions of this world and start to prioritize your life according to what is ultimately important. And therefore, we see that when something like the morning program or the temple program, it requires some sattva. Because why? Because it only really makes sense if you're interested in investing in the eternal. What is eternal? Oh, that's what it's meant for. Therefore, well, meant for Brahmanical, for the Brahmanical order, for Brahmanas. You see those people that are Brahmanical. And it's not that all of us are cultivating Brahmanical qualities, but we will manifest it to different extents. Let us be honest. We're not all are going to be, fully occupied just the Brahmanical duty. What's our timeline here, bro? That's it? 3 questions, okay. So, therefore, Rishabhadeva is saying, well, find some of these Brahmanas, find someone that is firmly fixed in eternality, so for someone that is firmly fixed in the ultimate goal of life, and serve them and associate with them. And that is really our hope. We cannot all necessarily become these great spiritual personalities, but we can all have their sangha, be connected to them and serve them. And that will save us. That will ultimately protect us in our own life from being too carried away. And we have to remember that these instructions that he gave was not for renunciates. He gave these instructions to his sons, and his sons were about to take over the kingdom. So that is the thing. This attitude of prioritizing the eternal and being careful of fruitive activity is not just meant for the renunciates, it's meant for those specifically that are actually acting in the world. It's meant for those people that are actively engaged in trying to make money. Because the Vaishnava philosophy is very practical. We're saying, yeah, that's the reality for most of us, is that if you're in a household ashram and you're going to have to make money to support your wife and your kids and your family. Yeah, basically, both both are probably working now. Both husband and wife have to work to support the family. So It's not that this attitude is meant for those who are not working, it's meant for those who are specifically engaged in the world. So that while you are engaging with the world and doing your activity and dealing with the material energy to the extent necessary, you don't get carried away by it. That's the trick. That's really what we're just trying to do. We're just like trying to come to a practical solution to the problems of at least fulfilling one's basic necessities without getting carried away by the material energy. That's the goal. Being fully renounced is very difficult, and for most people, not very possible. I've seen it also the earlier stages of, in the early stages of the Hare Krishna movement, you see that everybody was in the ashram, and that was like the idea with everyone. Everybody went for this ideal of just, being fully detached and being separate. But we've seen that, the reality is for most people, you're not going to be able to do it your whole life. Most people, that fully detached platforms of, being either like full-on renunciates, it's very difficult to live practically. But that mentality is able to be maintained even while one is engaging with the world. And that's really what these instructions are also meant for. It's meant for those who are active within the world, taking material responsibility and doing it in such a way that one doesn't get carried away. That is the trick. That is the trick, and it is possible. So therefore, he glorifies the Brahmanas, and he said, yes, that is going to be our tethering point, to find these Brahmanas, to connect with them, to value them. So we know that that is the symptom of Kali Yuga. The Brahmanas and the cows will not be respected, be neglected, because cows are only economically profitable if you slaughter them. To have them live out their natural lifespan is basically economically impossible, quote unquote. At least that's the belief. It is possible, but that's very difficult due to how the world is set up. And similarly, Brahmanas are also very impractical because they eat, they take up space, and they don't really produce any money or any practical benefit. So that's the difficulty with the Brahmanas. So we see that if you if you would really want to be Brahmanical, have a Brahmanical occupation, if you think about the Varnas, if you have to, for most of us, we have to engage with the secular world because most of us have to live and make money. The majority of devotees now in the world are not living in temple projects. They have to live within the secular economy, the modern economy, which has now taken over the whole world. You can't really escape the modern global economy. It's everywhere. There's very few villages left, even in the world. And those places that are not connected to the modern economy are totally ruined, ironically enough, by this thing that is being created. So most devotees, what can we do? We have to find our feet within the secular economy. And the moment that it's very interesting for example, when you shift, when you spend a lot of time in a temple and suddenly you have to move out and you have to start finding a job in the world and sort of, have to go through that process of integrating again into society to a certain extent, even if it's only practical. Like it's not that ideally, you don't become part of the modern world, but most of us, at least, you have to work in there. And that's Bhagavad Gita philosophy, is that how to be in the world and not of the world. But when you make that transition, then you think, okay, well, maybe I have to get a job. And then you're like, well, I'm going to have to get some kind of a work in the world. So what kind of work will I do? And then you think, for example, okay, well, what is my Varna? What am I? Am I Vaishya, Kshatriya, Brahmana, or Shudra? Then you'll see that it's actually very difficult. The lower three Varnas, Sudra, Vaishya, and Kshatriya, to a certain extent, it's not, you can get work as one of those, like if you're a Vaishya or a Sudra, it's very easy to get work. Like if you need work in that capacity, it's not complicated. Business is rife, business is big, and technical occupations is very big. And the majority of occupations now are technical. Just, all, like most engineering, even like if you're a computer programmer, all these things is technically it's Sudra occupations, because Sudra doesn't mean necessarily physical labor, but it means one is working with matter directly, just trying to shape matter into a certain way. So artists, programmers, uh, all the trades naturally. It's all, that's what it is. It's that kind of occupation where you're technically very good and you work with technical things. And so much education is available in that regard. So, it's always there as an occupation. But once you start hitting the higher, like Kshatriya or Brahmana Varna, it's very difficult to get work like that. If you work, if you're a modern academic, it's first, it's not so easy to get a job like that, and secondly, it's also like it's quite austere, and because you don't really have that Brahminical freedom. You're forced to write all this stuff the whole time, which is mostly nonsense. Um, So we see, that's my point, in the modern world, if you really want to have a Brahminical, if you want to be supported in a Brahminical occupation, the modern secular economy doesn't really make scope for that because the Brahmanas, they used to live off donations, and their main function and their goal was to be absorbed in direct spiritual activity, uh, teaching scripture and worshiping the deities. So that's really what the temples and ISKCON is really one of the only places that offers any kind of Brahmanical occupation in the modern world. The way to survive as a Brahmana, it's not so easy, especially when you try to enter into the secular world. So the Brahmanas are very rare, and they're having a tough time to those people who have that real Brahminical kind of inclination. It's difficult for them to find their feet in the modern world because the modern world does not value what you have to offer. The modern world values technical knowledge, technical expertise in business, and yeah, and even if you are of a more administrative capacity, like a Kshatriya, whatever, then usually you end up working for commercial interests. You know, usually people with that capacity, you can flourish perhaps in a corporate setting, but then you're working for the Vaishyas, you're working for people who have a profit mindset, which is, traditionally those who are really Kshatriyas in the full sense of the term. They, they're not interested in commercial endeavors, they're interested in the protection of people. So it's also difficult to really get an occupation that connects with that. So, any case, so we see that the Rshabhadev, he glorifies the Brahmanas to keep us aware that yes, we have to be connected to some of these people, the sadhus. Um, Keeping a connection with the sadhu and serving them and having their association is going to be key for those of us who are plugged into the world and having to work and deal with the contamination that comes from connecting with the modern world. And then we see this next section of verses, this last two, it's all about respect. The verse we just read. It glorifies the importance of being respectful to other living entities, being respectful to um, any being actually in this world. Fascinating that how respect is really one of the main things that you have to have if you have any kind of interest of becoming freed or liberated from the influence of material energy. Without respect, it's going to be very, very difficult. Respect is respectfulness, respect for other living entities, all kinds of living entities. It is what provides us a certain kind of buffer against against sin, against causing violence to other living entities in all kinds of fashions, and causing ruptures in our relationships also with the devotees. So respectfulness is really, it protects us, the culture of Vaishnava etiquette, and which is predominantly what? If you think Vaishnava etiquette, what does it mean? It's basically 90%. Some parts of it is okay, you put on tilak, you do this and this, like certain practical things, but the majority of Vaishnava culture is basically learning how to be respectful, learning how to express respect to various different manifestations of Krishna, whether as the devotees or as the physical form of the deity. So that respectfulness is really something very powerful, and really it's something that can really protect us. It protects us ultimately from ourselves and from our lower nature. So we see in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, it's explained how um, a symptom of the mode of goodness is a sense of embarrassment when one does something wrong. Very interesting. Symptom of a sattvic, if there's sattva gun in the psyche, whenever one does something bad, disrespectful, or does something wrong, one feels embarrassed by it. And that's all that can only happen if you have these impressions of respectfulness. So traditional culture is naturally very respectful. So respect is just something that if we can associate with it and really make it part of our life, it really helps a lot. It really helps a lot. It really helps protect us from a lot of things and helps protect us and keep our own lower qualities also in check and at bay. And should not be underestimated. And it's also one of those things that totally dying, completely dying in the modern world, in the Western world. It's just crazy because respect actually, the firm respect. It really takes um, a lot of practice, and usually that's to start very early. One of the main things that parents teach their kids is it's usually just how to be respectful because it doesn't come naturally. Respect is not something that naturally develops in us. It's something that has to be cultured, has to be learned. So luckily for those of us, when we get to connect with the Krishna consciousness movement, one can quickly pick up a lot of respect because there's a lot to be respectful of in the devotional society. Respect is also much more natural because there are people with devotees have elevated qualities and we are worshipping the deity. So there's a lot of things that are naturally respectful. I mean, can also not blame people who grew up in the modern world to not have so much respect because there's not so much to be respected. That's the other thing. It's there's how are you going to learn respect if there's nothing respect worthy that you are engaging with? So, but still, we see the Lord then makes this point. So to be respectful of everyone, not just those who are more powerful than you, everyone, those who are your equal, those who are junior to you, all this capacity to learn what it means to be respectful greatly enhances the likelihood that we will be able to go back to God at the end of this lifetime. That's a fact. And really protects us from becoming carried away by material energy, by fruitive activity. Because we see that to have respect, for example, for our vows, to have respect for the culture of Krishna consciousness, it protects us from getting carried away by ourselves and also by the influence of the modern world. So those were a few thoughts on the Rshabhadeva. We're at the end now of this chapter. Only one more verse left of his instructions, and then Sukadeva Goswami will continue his narration of how Lord Rshabhadeva, then interestingly enough, after he left his house and he traveled, how much disrespect he experienced. Interestingly enough, we see that people even passed wind on him, passed air on him, urinated on him. Some or other, he was completely belligerent, but he was totally tolerant. Really put it into practice. Able to also, that's another final thing we can say. We see that uh, more difficult sometimes more difficult than being respectful is to tolerate to be disrespected. Those two things go hand in hand. If one cannot take it so serious, if other people are disrespectful towards you, that also is going to greatly enhance your capacity to stay very calm and peaceful and not get so disturbed by the material world. Because yeah, that's just going to inevitably happen. So that's what we'll see later in these chapters, how Rishabhadev totally tolerated all kinds of things and always stayed totally respectful ultimately, even towards those who were disrespecting him. And just in that way, completely cut off all bondage and connection to the material energy. We can become completely oblivious to the influence of what's happening in the world. And that way manifested a very powerful example for all of us that sometimes, yeah, you have to just be detached, you know, just don't take yourself so seriously. Don't take other people's offenses so seriously. And don't take all your goals and your plans and your hopes in the material world, don't take it so seriously. And Rshabhadev manifested that to an extreme degree. And that's why he was always peaceful, and that's why he was known as the best of men. Okay, so we have any questions, any comments? That's Prem, I guess, gets preference because he's here in person. Okay. So what in terms of lifestyles and seasons, the understanding of students or even working with matter. So what's the distinction between those two? Well, Vaishyas deal with money, wealth, generation. Vaishyas are into producing. That's the Rshabhadeva says in the uh, Shanti Parva of the Mahabharata. So that ultimately, really, the Vaishya should only be really doing agricultural cow protection. Anything else is it's not ideal. But the Vaishyas, the main difference that is the expansive mentality, the mentality of growing, producing. Whereas the Sudra is not the technical, it's not into producing, it's into fixing things, building things, doing things. You understand the difference? There's a big difference between growth, or like investing, increasing, which comes from what? Comes either from the products of animals or from the products of the earth, or then in the modern world, just how money is structured. With just money, like you have people, yeah, like you have Vaishyas now, people that they just have capital, they have nothing else. They're not doing anything. All that they're doing is they're just growing their money by investing and selling and buying. You understand? So that's like the more Vaishya kind of platform that they work on, is the platform of capital, money, finance, and growth. Whereas most of the other things, when you start manipulating gross matter or even subtle matter, but it's not really about growth. It's about taking stuff, changing its form, building things. It's much more detail oriented also in general, and or doing the things that maintain the structure of how we're doing it, of the basic things that we need to live. So it's different kinds of proclivities there, different kinds of proclivities, and you'll see oftentimes that people are into the trades that it's not sometimes very difficult for them to sometimes run their own business, even if they're very good at what they're doing, because it's two different things. To be like very good in your trade and to be able to run your own business as a tradesman, it's two separate things. And not everyone can do that. It's like two different kinds of skills that you need, two different kinds of mentality to really do business. So yeah, those two are different ways you can separate them, but it's a separate kind of attitude. But the modern world, 99% of people are going to be engaged in either one of those two occupations. Either you're doing business or you're having some kind of physical thing. Most major industries now in the world, healthcare, same thing. It's all Sudra, same thing. Not you understand, meaning that all technical occupations. Healthcare is all technical. It's just all, how to fix the body, which is not so much different than fixing a car. If you even look at doctors, what do they wear? They wear scrubs because they get motor oil and grease all over their body. The basic equivalent of that. So it's all basically to do with fixing things, doing technical stuff, same kind of intelligence that you need. Whereas the Vaishya has a different kind of capacity. Anything else? Any other questions? Yes, you can see if there's anyone online who has anything. We've run out of members of the in-person audience.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for your class. It was very nice.
Thank you.
I could offer a few comments.
Yes, ma'am.
I was appreciating, in particular, your discussion of the issue of respecting all living entities, and the fact that this insulates us, it affords protection. Obviously, it protects us from offenses, which are the obstacle to our advancement in Krishna consciousness. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary on this verse, says one should give respect to all living beings in order to destroy faults such as disrespect and envy. So his angle is that by offering respect to all living entities, you are this is the means by which you overcome the fault of disrespect, and so it's a practical process of rectifying our mentality. Srila Prabhupada instructed us similarly to respect all living entities, and particularly to offer respect to these. He instructed us to regularly offer our obeisances to one another, and there are different ways to approach the matter of offering obeisances. It's understood in different ways. There is in the Upadeshamrita, the Nectar of Instruction, Srila Rupa Goswami, in the fifth verse, it says that one should mentally honor the devotee who chants the holy name of Lord Krishna. One should offer humble obeisances to the devotee who has undergone spiritual initiation, diksha, and is engaged in worshiping the deity. And one should associate with and faithfully serve that pure devotee who is advanced in undeviated devotional service and whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. And Srila Prabhupada in his purport elaborates on this in various ways. He talks a little bit about who is a Vaishnava and how individuals at different stages of their advancement should be regarded and respected. But in general, those who are initiated, it is appropriate to offer obeisances to such individuals. And there was a time in ISKCON when we used to always offer our obeisances to one another. At least once a day, every devotee would offer obeisances to every other devotee. See that so much anymore, but that was a regular practice. And I know in the temple in which I grew up, the New York temple, we used to have a little callus on in the middle of our forehead from offering our obeisances so frequently. And Srila Prabhupada also advised us, and particularly the encounter Mayavadi sannyasis. He advised us that we should offer obeisances even to the Mayavadi sannyasis. We should respect Mayavadi sannyasi, which came as a surprise to the devotees. They thought that we should not be offering respects to the Mayavadis, but Srila Prabhupada assured us that there would be no harm in doing so, but that it is appropriate to offer obeisances even to the Mayavadis. But respect should be given to all living entities, and this is the second reason, the second mindset with which we offer obeisances. It is because regardless of the level of advancement of a particular individual, and we offer obeisances to the Lord within the heart of that individual. And with that mentality, you can offer obeisances to any living entity, because we understand that Krishna is present within the hearts of all living entities, and that every living entity is a part and parcel of Krishna. So all of Krishna's and parcels are entitled to our respect, and we can offer obeisances to them because actually offering obeisances to Krishna within the heart of all living entities. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary, he says that It says, because I am situated in all beings, dear sons, you should meditate on all moving and non-moving beings with vision devoid of envy and other faults. So by this process of giving respect to all living beings and thereby destroying the faults uh, of disrespect and envy, you can acquire uh, the um, the pure vision by which you can appreciate the presence of Krishna within the hearts of all living beings. Um, so anyway, those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you very much for
You, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
thank you for yeah, very very nice that how it not just protects us, but it also actually destroys this lower nature. Thank you. It's a very nice point. Anyone else? A quick point before we end? Then we thank you all for tuning in today and Kadasi today. Uh, we wish everyone a happy day in Krishna consciousness.